General Kethavar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Void Claw. His red scales caught the light from the display screens around him. 4 arms crossed over his chest as he stared down at the moon below. Zirion 7 looked peaceful from space, but he knew better. Deep inside those crystal caves, death waited for anyone foolish enough to enter. The Kravik had been hiding there for 3 months. These bug-like aliens were the worst kind of enemy. They bred fast, fought dirty, and killed everything in their path. 3 star systems had already fallen to their attacks. Now they sat on this moon like a cancer, growing stronger every day. Kethavar had tried everything. His best soldiers, his strongest weapons, his most brilliant tactics. Nothing worked. The crystal caves were too deep, too twisted, too perfect for defense. Every attack ended the same way. Dead Zenthari soldiers and empty victories that meant nothing. His communication officer turned toward him. "General, the human ship is requesting permission to dock." Kethavar's scales darkened with annoyance. Humans. The Galactic Defense Council had forced this partnership on him. These newcomers had barely left their home planet 50 years ago. What could they possibly teach a warrior who had fought for 3 decades? "Grant them permission," he said. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through countless battles. The human shuttle arrived 30 minutes later. Kethavar watched through the docking bay cameras as the small craft settled onto his ship's deck. The shuttle looked primitive compared to Zenthari technology. Metal plates welded together, simple thruster systems, basic weapons. It reminded him of toys his younglings might play with. The airlock opened and humans stepped out. They were small, soft-looking creatures with only 2 arms each. No natural armor, no claws, no visible weapons built into their bodies. They walked upright like most intelligent species, but everything about them screamed weakness. Their leader approached first, Captain Jake Morrison, according to the files. He was tall for a human, but still came up to Kethavar's chest. Brown, hair, blue eyes, and a face that showed no fear despite being surrounded by alien warriors twice his size. "General Kethavar," Morrison said with a slight bow of his head. "Thank you for allowing us aboard your ship. We're ready to help with the Kravik problem." Kethavar studied the human captain. Morrison's uniform was clean but showed signs of wear. His boots had scuff marks. His hands bore small scars. This was not a desk warrior playing at command. This human had seen real fighting. "Captain Morrison," Kethavar replied, "I hope you understand what we face here. The Kravik are not like enemies you may have fought before." Morrison smiled, showing white teeth. "Sir, every enemy is different. That's what makes war interesting." The response surprised Kethavar. Most alien officers would have boasted about their species' fighting ability or demanded detailed intelligence reports. Morrison simply accepted the challenge as if it were nothing special. They moved to the main briefing room. Kethavar's tactical officers had prepared detailed holographic displays, showing the moon's surface and the known cave systems below. Red markers indicated Kravik positions. Blue markers showed failed Zenthari assault points. The display painted a clear picture of disaster. Morrison brought 2 officers with him. Lieutenant Amy Parker was a young female with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She studied the tactical displays with intense focus, asking precise questions about tunnel depths and structural integrity. Sergeant Ben Cole was older, with gray in his hair and hands that moved constantly, as if he were already building something in his mind. "The caves go down 3 kilometers, Kethavar explained. Natural crystal formations create a maze of tunnels and chambers. The Kravik have had months to prepare defensive positions. They know every passage, every hiding spot." Parker traced routes on the holographic display with her finger. "What about these smaller openings here? Are they too narrow for your forces?" "Our soldiers are larger than yours," one of Zenthari officers said. "Those passages would require crawling. It is beneath the dignity of Zenthari warriors." Cole looked up from his notes. "Dignity doesn't win wars, results do." The blunt statement created tension in the room. Zenthari officers bristled at the humans' casual dismissal of their military traditions. Kethavar raised one hand for silence. Morrison continued studying the displays. Your previous attacks followed standard assault doctrine. Advance in formation, maintain communication, secure each position before moving forward. It is the proper way, Kethvar said, proven over centuries of warfare. Against enemies who fought the same way, Morrison replied. The Kravek aren't following your rules. The human captain pointed to several areas on the display. They're using the cave system like a three-dimensional maze. When you advance through the main tunnels, they attack from side passages, retreat through hidden connections, and circle behind your positions. How would you suggest we proceed? Kethvar asked, curious despite his doubts. Morrison exchanged looks with his officers. Parker nodded once. Cole grinned like a man who had just solved an interesting puzzle. We go in small teams through multiple entry points, Morrison said. Instead of trying to control the tunnels, we make them work for us. Fast movement, flexible tactics, and weapons designed for close quarters fighting. Your soldiers will be slaughtered, Kethvar warned. Kravek warriors are 3 meters tall with natural armor and acid weapons. In close combat, they are nearly unstoppable. Morrison's expression never changed. General, humans have been fighting in caves and tunnels for thousands of years. It's what we do best. The confidence in his voice was absolute. Not boasting, not bravado, just simple facts stated as clearly as discussing the weather. Kethvar had heard such certainty before, usually from officers who died in their first real battle. But something about Morrison was different. The human captain carried himself like a veteran, moved like a predator, and spoke like someone who had survived impossible odds many times before. Very well, Kethvar said finally. We attack at dawn. Your forces will take the eastern cave systems. My warriors will assault from the west. We will see whose methods prove superior. Morrison smiled again. Thank you, General. We won't disappoint you. As the humans left to prepare their equipment, Kethvar remained in the briefing room. His tactical officers discussed the coming battle in low voices, expressing doubts about their new allies. The general said nothing, but his mind was already working through possibilities. Perhaps these humans would surprise him. Perhaps they would die quickly and prove his assumptions correct. Either way, tomorrow would bring answers to questions that had been troubling him since the partnership began. The moon Zirion 7 continued its slow rotation below them, crystal caves gleaming in the light of distant stars. Soon those caves would run red with blood. The only question was whose blood it would be. Dawn came quickly on Zirion 7. The moon's twin suns cast strange shadows across the crystal formations that covered its surface. General Kethvar stood in his command center, watching dozens of display screens that showed his forces preparing for battle. 300 Zenthari warriors moved toward their assigned positions. They wore full battle armor that gleamed silver in the morning light. Energy rifles charged and ready. Formation perfect. Each soldier knew his place and his duty. This was how civilized armies fought wars. The human forces were different. Only 30 soldiers moving in small groups toward the eastern caves. Their black combat gear made them hard to see against the dark crystal. No formations, no standard equipment, no obvious plan that Kethvar could understand. Sir, both forces are in position, his communications officer reported. Begin the assault, Kethvar ordered. His warriors advanced according to plan. Alpha Company took the main entrance while Beta and Gamma companies secured the flanking tunnels. Energy weapons lit up the cave mouths as Zenthari soldiers poured fire into the darkness ahead. The response came immediately. Kravek warriors rushed from hidden positions, their massive forms moving with surprising speed. 8 feet tall with 6 legs and natural armor plates, they looked like nightmares made real. Acid spit flew through the air, hissing where it struck, rock and metal. Kethvar watched his tactical displays with growing concern. The Zenthari advance had stalled within minutes. His soldiers maintained proper formation, but took heavy casualties. The caves were too narrow for their standard tactics. Energy weapons that worked perfectly in open space became less effective in confined tunnels. Sir, Alpha Company is requesting reinforcements, came the report. Send them, Kethvar ordered. But his attention was already shifting to the eastern displays. The humans had vanished. Their position markers showed them entering the cave system, but the cameras could no longer track their movements. No energy weapon discharges lit up the tunnels. No radio chatter filled the communication channels. They had simply disappeared into the darkness like ghosts. "Where are the humans?" Kethvar demanded. "Unknown, sir." They went silent after entering the caves. This was wrong. Soldiers did not simply vanish during combat operations. Either they were dead, or they were doing something that defied everything Kethvar understood about warfare. 15 minutes passed. His own forces continued their grinding advance, paying in blood for every meter gained. The casualty reports made his scales darken with anger. Too many good warriors were dying in these cursed tunnels. Then the first explosion echoed from the eastern cave system. It was not the sharp crack of energy weapons or the roar of plasma charges. This sound was different, deeper, more controlled, the kind of explosion that came from someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Sir, we're detecting structural damage in Section 7 of the eastern caves," his sensor operator reported. "Structural damage?" Kethvar moved to the sensor display. "Show me." The holographic image revealed a collapsed tunnel that had sealed off a major Kravek stronghold. The collapse was too precise to be accidental. Someone had used explosives to bring down specific support points, trapping the enemy forces inside. Second explosion followed, then a third. Each one sealed another tunnel, cutting off Kravek escape routes and dividing their forces into smaller groups. The pattern was clear now. The humans were not trying to fight their way through the caves, they were changing the caves themselves. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human forces." Morrison's voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. "General, this is Captain Morrison. We've reached the central chamber system, requesting artillery support on coordinates I'm sending now." Kethvar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human position markers had somehow moved 3 kilometers into the cave system. His own forces, with 10 times more soldiers, had barely advanced 500 meters. How did they get there so fast, he asked no one in particular. The answer came from Lieutenant Parker's voice on the communication channel. "Sir, we're using maintenance tunnels and natural fissures that the Kravek ignored. They're too big to fit through most of these passages." Too big to fit. The humans were crawling through spaces that proper soldiers would never consider entering. They were fighting like insects, scurrying through cracks and holes instead of advancing with dignity and honor. But it was working. Another explosion, bigger this time. The sensor displays showed massive damage to the cave system's central hub. Kravek position markers began winking out as their communication network failed. "Sir, the eastern Kravek forces are in retreat," came the report. Retreat. The word hit Kethvar like a physical blow. His warriors had been fighting the same enemy for hours with minimal progress. The humans had been underground for 30 minutes, and already had the Kravek running. Sergeant Cole's voice joined the communication channel. "General, we've identified the main breeding chamber. Sending coordinates now. One good orbital strike should finish this." Kethvar looked at the coordinates. The target was 4 kilometers underground, protected by solid crystal formations that should have made it impossible to reach. Yet somehow the humans had not only found it, they had fighting their way there in less than an hour. "How many casualties?" Kethvar asked. 7 wounded, sir. No deaths so far. 7 wounded. His own forces had lost over 40 warriors in the same time period. The humans were not just succeeding where his soldiers failed. They were doing it without losing a single life. The orbital strike came 10 minutes later. The breeding chamber collapsed in a massive explosion that shook the entire moon. With their queen dead and their tunnel system destroyed, the remaining Kravek forces surrendered within the hour. Kethvar stood in his command center, staring at the final casualty reports. Zenthari losses: 43 dead, 112 wounded. Human losses: 12 wounded, 0 dead. The humans had accomplished in 1 hour what his forces had failed to do in months of fighting. They had done it with fewer soldiers, lighter weapons, and tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. But they had won. Captain Morrison appeared on the main display screen, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Behind him, human soldiers were helping wounded Zenthari warriors, sharing their medical supplies and water rations. "Mission accomplished, General," Morrison reported. "The cave system is secure. We're ready to begin evacuation of casualties." Kethvar found his voice after a long moment. "How did you do it?" Morrison's expression was matter-of-fact. "We adapted to the environment instead of trying to force the environment to adapt to us. In spaces like this, small and flexible beats, big and strong every time." The human captain paused, then added, "Your warriors fought bravely, sir. We couldn't have succeeded without their support drawing the main Kravik forces away from our infiltration routes." It was a generous statement, but Kethvar knew the truth. The humans had won this battle almost single-handedly. They had redefined what was possible in tunnel warfare and made it look easy. As the evacuation began, Kethvar watched human soldiers carry Zenthari wounded to safety. They showed the same care for alien casualties as they did for their own people. No arrogance, no superiority, just soldiers helping soldiers. Something fundamental had changed in his understanding of warfare and civilization. These humans possessed abilities that went beyond tactics and weapons. They thought differently, fought differently, and treated their allies differently. For the first time in his long military career, General Kethvar began to question everything he thought he knew about the art of war. The medical bay of the Void Claw buzzed with activity. Zenthari doctors worked alongside human medics to treat the wounded from both sides. General Kethvar walked between the beds, observing something he had never seen before in his 30 years of military service. Sergeant Rick Hayes lay on a medical table with a deep acid burn across his left shoulder. The human refused pain medication until every Zenthari soldier had been treated first. When a Zenthari doctor tried to examine his wound, Hayes insisted that the alien casualties needed attention more urgently. "I can wait," Hayes said through gritted teeth. "Those warriors took worse hits than me." The Zenthari doctor looked confused. In most alien cultures, rank and species determined treatment priority. But Hayes was giving up his place in line for enemy soldiers who had contributed nothing to the human victory. Kethvar approached the wounded sergeant. "Why do you care about our wounded? They are not your people." Hayes looked up at the towering, alien general with clear eyes. "Sir, they bled fighting the same enemy we fought. That makes them our brothers." Brothers. The word struck Kethvar like a physical blow. In Zenthari culture, military bonds were based on duty and honor. Soldiers served together because orders demanded it. The idea that warriors from different species could share genuine brotherhood seemed impossible. Yet here was proof. Human soldiers moved through the medical bay, offering water to thirsty Zenthari, sharing their rations with hungry aliens, and providing comfort to warriors who had initially viewed them with suspicion and contempt. Private Danny Murphy sat beside a young Zenthari who had lost 2 arms in the fighting. The alien was barely out of childhood by his species standards, probably on his first combat mission. Murphy could not speak the Zenthari language, but he stayed with the wounded warrior anyway, offering silent companionship in a time of pain and fear. "Your soldiers show remarkable compassion," Kethvar told Captain Morrison, who was coordinating the medical evacuation. Morrison looked up from his tablet computer. "They're good people, General. War doesn't change that." "War changes everything," Kethvar replied. "It reveals what creatures truly are beneath their civilized appearance." "Maybe that's true," Morrison said. "But what it reveals in humans is usually worth seeing." The captain's confidence was not boastful. He spoke like someone stating a simple fact that required no proof or argument. This attitude puzzled Kethvar more than the tactical victories had. Later that day, Morrison invited the general to observe their after-action review. Kethvar expected a celebration of victory, perhaps speeches about human superiority or demands for recognition from the Galactic Defense Council. Instead, he witnessed something completely different. Lieutenant Parker stood before a holographic display showing the battle timeline. She pointed to specific moments where human operations had nearly failed or succeeded only through luck rather than skill. At 0347 hours, Alpha Team almost walked into a Kravek ambush here, she explained. Murphy's early warning saved the squad, but we should have detected the threat through proper reconnaissance. Sergeant Cole added his own analysis. The explosives worked perfectly, but we used 30% more charges than necessary. Better planning could have achieved the same results with less equipment. Morrison nodded at each criticism. What about the tunnel collapse in Sector 4? That wasn't in our original plan. Improvisation saved us when the primary route was blocked, Parker admitted. But improvisation means we hadn't prepared properly for known variables. Cathvar listened with growing amazement. These humans had won a complete victory with minimal casualties. They had succeeded where his own forces had failed repeatedly. Yet they spent their time analyzing mistakes and missed opportunities instead of celebrating their achievement. Why do you focus on failures? He asked Morrison. You accomplished the impossible today. Morrison turned to face him. General, success without learning is just luck. Next time we might face an enemy that doesn't give us second chances for our mistakes. This attitude toward victory was completely alien to Kethvar's experience. Zenthari military culture celebrated successful operations and honored the warriors who achieved them. Questioning victory or searching for flaws in successful missions was considered a sign of weakness or lack of confidence. But the humans treated each success as a step toward greater understanding rather than an end in itself. They were already preparing for battles they had never fought against enemies they had never seen. The review continued for 2 hours. Every decision was examined, every tactic questioned, every assumption challenged. The humans dissected their own performance with the same intensity they had shown in planning the original assault. When the formal review ended, Morrison invited Kethavar to join him for a private conversation in the ship's observation deck. The two officers stood before a large window that showed Zarian 7 slowly rotating below them. Tell me about human military history, Kethavar said. I want to understand how your people learned to fight this way. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring at the stars beyond the moon. Earth is not a kind planet, General. It never gave us easy answers or simple solutions. Every environment was different. Every enemy was unique. We learned to adapt because the alternative was extinction. The captain began describing conflicts that spanned thousands of years of human development. Wars fought in frozen mountains, where soldiers froze to death if they stopped moving. Battles in burning deserts where water was more valuable than ammunition. Naval campaigns on oceans that could swallow entire fleets in sudden storms. We fought each other for resources, territory, ideas, and sometimes just because we were different. Morrison continued. Every war taught us new lessons. Every defeat forced us to find better ways to survive. Kethvar absorbed these stories with fascination. Most species develop military traditions based on their natural advantages and preferred fighting conditions. Humans had developed their military culture by facing every possible disadvantage and finding ways to overcome them. Your soldiers, today, Morrison said. They represent thousands of years of learning how to win impossible battles, not through superior strength or better weapons, but through superior thinking and superior will. What do you mean by superior will? Kethavar asked. Morrison pointed toward the medical bay where human and Zenthari soldiers were recovering together. The will to keep fighting when logic says you should quit. The will to protect people who aren't your own species. The will to sacrifice yourself for ideas that might not benefit you personally. The general considered this explanation. Zenthari culture valued duty and honor, but these were concepts tied to rank, position, and social status. Human military culture seemed based on something deeper and more personal. You fight for each other, he said finally. We fight for what we believe in, Morrison corrected. And we believe that everyone deserves the chance to live free from fear and oppression. That includes aliens who might look down on us as primitive newcomers. The conversation continued late into the ship's night cycle. Morrison shared more stories of human conflicts, each one illustrating different aspects of their military philosophy. The common thread running through all these tales was humanity's refusal to accept defeat as final or impossible problems as unsolvable. When they finally parted, Kethvar returned to his quarters with his mind spinning. Everything he had witnessed over the past 2 days challenged his fundamental understanding of warfare, leadership, and civilization itself. The humans had not just won a tactical victory. They had demonstrated a completely different approach to existence that seemed both more effective and more noble than anything he had encountered in 3 decades of galactic military service. For the first time in his life, General Kethvar began to question whether he was serving the right cause. 3 days had passed since the battle on Zerion 7. General Kethvar stood in his private quarters staring at a holographic display that showed personnel files from across the galaxy. He had spent hours reading about human military history, human culture, and human achievement since joining Galactic Society. The numbers told an incredible story. In 50 years, humans had gone from a single-planet species to active members of the Galactic Defense Council. They had negotiated trade agreements with 12 different alien civilizations. Their military had won victories against enemies that had defeated much older and more advanced species. But the numbers could not explain what Kethvar had witnessed during the past few days. They could not capture the essence of what made humans different from every other species he had encountered. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to his quarters. "Come," he called. Captain Morrison entered, carrying a small device that Kethvar recognized as a human data tablet. The captain looked tired but satisfied, the expression of a soldier whose mission was complete, but whose mind was already moving to the next challenge. "General, I wanted to thank you for your hospitality and cooperation during this operation," Morrison said. "My superiors have asked me to invite you to visit Earth when your duties permit." The invitation surprised Kethvar. "Why would your leaders want to meet with me?" Morrison smiled. "Because you treated us like equals when most aliens see us as primitive newcomers. That kind of respect is rare in the galaxy." "You earned respect through your actions," Kethvar replied. "Any commander would recognize your abilities after witnessing your performance." "Would they?" Morrison asked. "We've worked with 17 different alien militaries over the past 5 years. You're the first senior officer who bothered to ask how we accomplished our objectives instead of just accepting the results." The statement made Kethvar uncomfortable. He had always prided himself on being a thorough military professional, but Morrison's words suggested that most alien commanders were failing to learn from human successes. "Tell me about Earth," Kethvar said, settling into his chair. "What is your homeworld like?" Morrison activated his data tablet and projected a series of images into the air between them. The first showed Earth from space, a blue and white sphere that looked deceptively peaceful. "Beautiful," Kethvar observed. "And dangerous," Morrison added. "Those white swirls are massive storm systems that can destroy entire cities. The blue oceans can swallow ships without warning. The green land masses include deserts that kill through heat, mountains that kill through cold, and jungles filled with creatures that kill through poison." More images followed. Cities that rose like mountains from the earth, filled with billions of humans living and working together. Vast farms that fed entire continents. Factories that produced everything from simple tools to complex spacecraft. "How do you manage such diversity?" Kethvar asked. "Most species build uniform settlements that reflect their single culture." "Humans don't have a single culture," Morrison explained. "We have thousands of different cultures, languages, religions, and traditions. Earth contains more variety in one planet than most star systems contain across multiple worlds." The idea seemed impossible. Kethvar's own species, the Zenthari, had achieved unity by eliminating cultural differences centuries ago. One language, one government, one way of thinking about everything. It was efficient and logical. "How do you prevent constant warfare between these different groups?" he asked. Morrison's expression grew thoughtful. "We don't always prevent it. Humans have fought terrible wars against each other throughout our history, but we've also learned that our differences make us stronger when we work together, instead of fighting each other." The captain showed images of human military units that included soldiers from dozens of different ethnic backgrounds, speaking Different languages following different traditions but working together toward common goals. This diversity is why we adapt so quickly to new situations, Morrison continued. When we face a problem, we can draw on thousands of different approaches and combine them into solutions that no single culture could develop alone. Kethvar studied the images with growing fascination. Human civilization looked chaotic compared to the ordered societies that most species created. Yet this chaos had produced remarkable results in a very short time. "What about your military structure?" he asked. "How do you maintain discipline with so many different viewpoints?" Morrison laughed. "That's the beauty of it, General. We don't try to eliminate different viewpoints. We use them. When Lieutenant Parker analyzes a tactical situation, she brings her background in theoretical mathematics. When Sergeant Cole plans demolitions, he draws on his experience as a construction worker before joining the military." The human captain showed more files detailing the backgrounds of his soldiers. Murphy had grown up in a farming community and understood how to live off the land. Hayes had worked as a rescue worker and knew how to move through dangerous spaces safely. Parker had studied alien biology and could predict how different species might react in combat situations. "Each soldier brings unique skills and perspectives," Morrison explained. "Instead of trying to make everyone think the same way, we train them to combine their different strengths into something greater than the sum of its parts." This approach to military organization violated everything Kethvar had learned about command structure and unit cohesion. Yet he had seen the results firsthand. Human soldiers worked together with an efficiency that surpassed anything he had witnessed in 3 decades of military service. "Your species fascinates me," Kethvar admitted. "You appear weak individually, but become incredibly strong when working together." "That's because we understand something that most species miss," Morrison said. "True strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being able to overcome your imperfections through cooperation, adaptation, and persistent effort." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Kethvar's bridge crew. A new crisis had developed in the Andromaca system. The Stellar Republic was requesting immediate military assistance to deal with a pirate fleet that had been raiding commercial shipping routes. "I have to respond to this," Kethvar told Morrison. "My ship is the closest military vessel to the crisis zone." Morrison stood to leave, then paused. "General, if you need assistance with this operation, my crew would be honored to serve alongside your forces again." The offer was generous but unnecessary. The pirate threat was a simple matter compared to the Kravek hive they had just eliminated. Kethvar's forces were more than capable of handling conventional enemies in open space combat. "Thank you, Captain, but this should be a straightforward operation," he replied. "Pirates lacked the organization and defensive positions that made the Kravek so dangerous." Morrison nodded and headed toward the door. As he reached the exit, he turned back with a slight smile. "General, there's no such thing as a straightforward operation. Every enemy teaches new lessons if you're willing to learn them." After Morrison left, Kethvar remained in his quarters for another hour, thinking about their conversation. The human approach to warfare and civilization challenged every assumption he had made about strength, unity, and military effectiveness. His species had achieved greatness through order, discipline, and adherence to proven methods. Humans had achieved similar results through chaos, adaptation, and constant willingness to try new approaches. Both methods worked, but the human way seemed to offer something his people lacked: the ability to grow stronger through adversity rather than simply enduring it. As his ship prepared to depart for the Andromaca system, Kethvar found himself wondering what other lessons humanity might teach him if he had the courage to keep learning. General Kethvar sat in his private office aboard the Voidclaw, staring at a document that would change his life forever. The resignation letter was brief, containing only the words necessary to end a 30-year military career. 2 weeks had passed since the operation on Xerion 7. The pirate crisis in the Andromaca system had been resolved quickly, just as he had predicted. His forces had eliminated the threat using standard tactics and overwhelming firepower. It was a textbook victory that proved the effectiveness of traditional Zenthari military doctrine. But the victory felt empty. Throughout the entire operation, Kethvar had found himself thinking about how humans would have approached the same problem. Would they have found a way to capture the pirates instead of destroying them? Could they have learned something valuable from studying pirate tactics and organization? Would they have shown mercy to the defeated enemy? These questions troubled him because they suggested that winning battles was not enough. There were better ways to achieve victory, ways that created growth and understanding instead of just eliminating threats. His communication system chimed with an incoming message from Zenthari High Command. Fleet Admiral Zethkol appeared on the holographic display, his ancient scales marked with the scars of a dozen major campaigns. General Kethvar, your recent performance reports have been excellent as always, the Admiral said. I am offering you command of the 3rd Battle Fleet. It is a position that will lead to promotion within 5 years. The offer represented everything Kethvar had worked toward his entire career. Command of a full battle fleet was the dream of every Zenthari officer. It would make him one of the most powerful military leaders in the Empire. I am honored by your confidence, Admiral, Kethvar replied. However, I must respectfully decline. Admiral Zethkol's expression showed complete confusion. Decline? Why would you refuse such an opportunity? Because I have decided to resign from military service. The words hung in the air between them like an explosion. Admiral Zethkol stared at him for long moments, clearly unable to process what he had heard. Resign? You are at the peak of your career. Your service record is perfect. Your recent victory over the Kravek has brought honor to our entire species. The humans won that victory, Admiral. I merely watched them do what we could not. The humans are primitive newcomers, Admiral Zethkol said dismissively. Their success was luck, nothing more. Kethvar felt something inside him grow cold at those words. Sir, I respectfully disagree. The humans represent the future of warfare and civilization. I wish to be part of that future. The conversation ended badly. Admiral Zethkol accused him of losing his mind, of betraying his own species, of abandoning honor and duty for alien fantasies. The old admiral could not understand why anyone would choose uncertainty over security, growth over tradition, questions over answers. Within a week, Kethvar had transferred his command to a younger officer and booked passage on a civilian transport bound for Earth. He carried only personal belongings and the savings accumulated over 3 decades of military service. The journey to Earth took 12 days. Kethvar spent the time studying human languages, customs, and legal systems. Earth's immigration procedures were surprisingly straightforward for a planet that had joined galactic society so recently. They had systems in place to handle alien residents seeking permanent settlement. When the transport dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, Kethvar pressed his face to the observation port and stared at the blue and white world that would become his new home. It looked exactly as Morrison had described it. Beautiful and dangerous, peaceful and chaotic, unified and diverse all at the same time. The Immigration Processing Center was located on a space station orbiting Earth. Kethvar found himself in a waiting room filled with aliens from dozens of different species, all seeking permission to live among humans. The diversity surprised him. Earth was attracting immigrants from across the galaxy. When his turn came, he faced a human immigration officer named Helen Martinez. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the same calm competence he had observed in Captain Morrison and his soldiers. General Kethvar, she said, reading from his file. You're requesting permanent resident status with eventual citizenship eligibility. May I ask why you chose Earth? The question he had been expecting. Officer Martinez, I have witnessed something rare in this galaxy. Humans possess wisdom that goes beyond technology or military power. You face challenges by becoming stronger rather than avoiding difficulty. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. That's an interesting perspective. What do you hope to do here? I want to learn, Kethvar said simply. I want to understand how humans think, how they solve problems, how they build a civilization that grows, stronger through diversity instead of weaker. The interview continued for 2 hours. Martinez asked detailed questions about his background, his motivations, and his plans for life on Earth. She was thorough but fair, treating him with the same respect she would show any applicant regardless of species or background. "Your application is approved," she said finally. "Welcome to Earth, General. I hope you find what you're looking for here." Kethvar chose to settle in Denver, Colorado. The city offered both urban civilization and access to natural wilderness. The Rocky Mountains reminded him of the crystal formations on Zerion 7, but these peaks spoke of beauty rather than death. His first months on Earth were challenging. Human society was more complex than any civilization he had encountered. Different cultures, languages, and traditions existed side by side, sometimes cooperating and sometimes competing, but always learning from each other. He rented a small apartment near the university and spent his days studying human history, philosophy, and military science. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that his decision had been correct. Humans had faced every possible challenge that could confront an intelligent species. Wars, natural disasters, resource shortages, technological failures, social conflicts, and countless other crises. Each challenge had made them stronger and wiser instead of simply harder or more defensive. 6 months after his arrival, Kethvar received an unexpected visitor. Major Morrison, recently promoted, stood at his apartment door wearing civilian clothes and carrying a bottle of what he identified as Kentucky bourbon. "I heard you were living here," Morrison said with a smile. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're adjusting to Earth life." They spent the evening talking about Kethvar's experiences as a new resident. Morrison was curious about his perspective on human society, asking questions that showed genuine interest in learning from an alien viewpoint. "How do we look to you now?" Morrison asked. "After living among us for months instead of just fighting alongside us for days?" Kethvar considered the question carefully. "You are what every species should aspire to become. Not perfect, but always trying to be better. Not the strongest, but never willing to quit. Not the smartest, but always eager to learn." Morrison raised his glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Kethvar agreed. Later that evening, Morrison made an offer that would define the rest of Kethvar's life. Earth's military was establishing a new division focused on interspecies cooperation and threat assessment. They needed advisors with experience in galactic military affairs and deep understanding of both human and alien approaches to warfare. "We could use someone like you," Morrison said. "Someone who understands what makes humans different and can help us prepare for challenges we haven't even imagined yet." Kethvar accepted immediately. The position would allow him to serve his adopted world while continuing to learn from the species that had captured his imagination and earned his loyalty. Years later, when the next major galactic crisis emerged, former General Kethvar found himself working alongside many of the same humans who had first shown him the possibilities of adaptive warfare and inclusive civilization. He had found his place among them, and he had never been more certain of any decision in his long life.